straight and like can talk like with the police.
That's a regular thing.
Right.
And then, in editing, so when I turn in the tape, you get this, oh, shot. And because it grossed them out so much. That's why I had to see. That's welcome to my world.
But that's
Hi, my dear, how are you?
wow.
Good. I can just get you guys to sign it.
Right. I'm thinking I know they're not gonna air it like this.
Right.
You know, word.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of things with it.
She's right here.
You there, right? That's what you.
But I did, she did not just tell me that, that when I asked her
Right.
a question,
You know, nothing.
okay, just tell me that, that when I asked her
Right.
a question,
You know, nothing.
okay, just
You're done.
that's possible. She said, but it was very nice to me. She said, I asked, like other people I know,
Mm-hmm.
they should post my clip, and I did have it.
All the first.
Right.
Ask Teresa, I don't know any of that.
Yeah.
And what she
No, because when I said.
When you sit here,
Yeah, somebody should take those as well.
so, I think, that's that camera right there. So, I think,
Yeah, the guy is here.
yeah.
They're always here.
he's here. So that's who will control it from there, from that way.
remember,
But everything on, because I can see it in my office, so we'll probably run back in there in the next couple minutes.
Yeah, but this, I find it, I have to ask them, why, what's the afternoon, fix it next time.
Okay.
Fix this. Otherwise, I'm like other journalists, I ask question, I'm bridge between Afghan women and here, that's my right to ask.
Oh,
No, that's. I saw some, why did you like, you're a nice person. I'm very nice person. But the thing, maybe I'm too old. Maybe I became old.
No.
Still look pretty, don't worry.
no.
I think sometimes he missed that. It happens with your
No, except me.
Always? I saw you on TV like many
No,
times.
yesterday.
So yesterday it's okay. Sometimes he misses it. Sometimes he misses it.
Only me, they bring everybody instead of one time, like not 2 times.
He's controlling the switch and sometimes something happens. It's not like
I need to know, I don't.
Okay, you can talk to him.
I'm very concerned. I need to know, what's the reason, that's it. I became happy and quiet and I said,
talk to
okay,
him.
maybe, because I didn't do anything. The only reason, maybe I think that I owe this one, because this is Afghan woman situation, maybe I owe this is my situation that people should know like that. This is not fair, that is very Taliban say. Maybe for this reason that I should, I was here, I put it here, this is my symbol, this is my year, I have to fight for my woman.
Yeah, it made you feel
I mean, yeah, I'm still.
away. You know what I mean? And I can't speak for you feel
I mean, yeah, I'm still.
away. You know what I mean? And I can't speak for you and your feelings in that moment to get them to understand
What?
how that made you feel. So I think it would be better.
Maybe they have some reason.
Or maybe it wasn't a reason. Maybe it just happened. Maybe it just happened, but you don't know that until you
But
ask.
you know me, he knows that I am so popular and well known, everybody love, everybody like me, I'm their voiceless people, Afghan people between me and them.
I don't think it was anything intentional, but again, we don't know until we ask. You know what I mean? Until we ask, it was anything intentional, but again, we don't know until we ask. You know what I mean? Until we ask, and then maybe it was a mistake, and then
And
now.
all my TV people say, thank you, you asked me, give us good answer, but the only thing we didn't see any post on the clip. My sound was there, my voice was there.
But you weren't there.
But
But your face.
Yeah.
I would just ask, and again, like I said, it's because in our room, there's 2 different channels, so we get to see from this way, and then we get to see from that
Yeah,
way.
but it happened, somebody else watched them for more than 20 times. My son, my TV channel, my YouTube, everybody see what happened.
They heard you, but they didn't see you.
Anyway, it's better to find out.
Yes. Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just ask straightforward. You know?
But thank you so much
Of
for
course.
listening.
Of course.
And
Thank
the
you.
other part was, you're teaching, and then you're doing it.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm sorry, my mic was hot. Ran out of
Take off my camera first.
the. question, you just hit a button and the camera automatically comes down to you. So if you sit down and we get your shot, we can't go back to you. So that's what happened yesterday.
Thank you. At least I become happy. How can I do that today? I want to finish.
Yeah, just when you sit down, don't move.
Oh.
When the briefing
Is that
starts,
okay?
yeah, any chair is fine, but if you move seats and I set your shot, and then when you ask your question, it's going to go to whoever sits.
Okay.
Yeah, if it wasn't anything like that, yeah,
Is that okay?
as long as you don't move seats, yeah.
But the only thing I remove my camera because it's not allowed.
Yeah, that's with these guys.
I'm gonna come back.
Yeah, I think I already got you, but yeah. Once you sit down, don't move.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
How are you?
How are you?
Good, good. Are you here with the book as well? You gotta choose that. I didn't choose that. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you said we should start yesterday because I get extra photos. Now I'm happy.
Oh, see?
Extra photos. Now I'm happy.
Oh, see?
Hello. Hello. I didn't get any email from you yesterday.
Oh, actually, I mean, just send it us. Let me
Did you send me an email?
just wait for details. I'll get back to you. But thank you very much. It was me as well.
زن است که تاریخ جهان می سازد شهکارش به خداوندان می سازد اصل رئیس بسان خود کردم که وضعیت زنان چوخ بیتر خود شد شکر
Hey, my brother, how are you?
How are you? Good to see you.
How's it going?
Oh. I have one master car, but I will do like the old one. It's 9 months. Okay. That's a good number, right? So how many years in Islamabad? Like a couple of years? 2 years. Oh. You like it? Pakistan. 10 years.
A topper. So dangerous as that might be, I'll turn right to your questions. Daphne.
Ukraine has said it would suspend the flow of gas through a transit point, which it said delivers almost a third of the fuel Europe through Ukraine. Will the U.S. need to increase LNG exports to Europe given this move? And does it change the timeline at all for more U.S. or EU tightened sanctions on Russia?
Well, it doesn't change one timeline, and that is the timeline associated with lessening global dependence on Russian oil. And the timeline associated with that is as soon as possible. As you know, the United States, countries around the world have already taken Russian energy. Other countries have followed suit using their own authorities. Blocks of countries are having these discussions about how best they can do that. So I think what we've heard enforces what we already knew. We knew that there has to be a near-term response to the disruptions in the global energy market that President Putin's invasion of Ukraine had. And as you've heard from us in recent weeks, we have been in close coordination and close touch with allies and partners around the world to surge energy supplies, tapping strategic petroleum reserves. In the case of the United States, tens of millions of barrels from our strategic petroleum reserve. Other countries have made similar strategic petroleum reserves to ensure that supplies of energy are where they need to be for countries that need it in this interim period. And I call it an interim period. Bigger term is to see to it that we take steps to lessen dependence on Russian energy. Part of that is going to be the transition away from fuels towards renewables, towards green technology. That will help with that. But part of that too will be finding longer term sustainable ways to ensure that especially those partners on the front lines who have found themselves over the course of years or even decades reliant on Russian energy flows, to see to it that they have other options to fulfill their anything we're working on, including in the context of the US-EU Energy Task Force that President Biden established with his European counterpart a number of weeks ago. Francesco.
A quick one on Ukraine, and Blumenthal introduced a resolution today asking the Secretary to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Can you update us on the process, if there is one, to qualify as a state sponsor of terrorism? Is that something you're keen to?
Aware of that resolution, aware of Congress's interest in this matter, and of course of Congress' broader interest in our approach to Russia and Ukraine. What I can say is that the state sponsor of terrorism statute is a statute, not to, and that means that it is something, the criteria by which states are designated are not, those are not up to us, those are up to Congress. What is up to us is to take the law, to take a close look at the facts, that is to say what Russia is doing, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in countries around the world, to determine whether that fact pattern fits that is laid out in the statute. So that's something that we're always looking at, not only with this authority, but with every authority that we have, every appropriate lever, we can, to apply pressure on the Russian Federation until and unless its brutal invasion of Ukraine, its brutal aggression comes to a halt. And the fact is that together with dozens of countries across 4 continents, we have applied our own sanctions. We've used international as well to not only apply sanctions, but also export controls. And so the practical effect is that much of what various authorities have already been put in place, given what we've already done vis-a-vis our own authorities and what other countries have done in terms of their authorities. But we'll continue to watch Russia's actions in Ukraine merit and qualify for additional authorities if we feel those authorities are appropriate. We won't.
Does that just mean that at this stage it doesn't qualify, it doesn't meet the criteria?
We're always looking at the facts and the law, and we'll continue to do that.
Can you talk a little bit about terrorism designation, whether there are FTO designations or state-sponsored designations? And are you willing to say what a lot of people say privately? And in terms of the 2 cases that we're looking at right now, the IRGC and most, if not all, of what could be done if these designations were, 1, kept or added, would be exactly the same as what previous administrations have already been doing.
Well, I think your point is well taken, that there are various authorities we can use when it comes to the IRGC. It is an entity that is among the most heavily sanctioned entities on the face of the planet. In addition to the FTO, there are a number of other authorities that are used to constrain its activities and those of its leadership and its proxies as well. I used this data point the other day. But of the 107 sanctions the Biden administration has imposed on those, some 3/4 have been applied against the IRGC or its proxies. So the fact is that we do have a number of tools, but whether it's the SST, whether it's the FTA, both of these things are defined by statute.
Understood. But I mean, isn't the administration a little bit frustrated that people seem to be making political points out of this?
Matt, we're cognizant of the town we live in.
And
we're closely examining the facts and the law with all of these things. That applies equally to the state sponsor of terrorism designation as you.
For people who have been around for a long time, including those in this building, in the legal advisor's office, and others, decisions, if they go the way that the critics suspect they will make any difference at all.
I don't know what the critics, what they expect. We are going to follow the law. We're going to do what's in our national security interest when it comes to every authority under the sun, and whether the target of those authorities is Russia, any other state actor or non-state actor. But since you have raised Congress, I will walk through this open door and point out the fact that our Ukraine has been, just as we promised, massive. We have provided $4.5 billion worth of security assistance to Ukraine since the start of this administration, some 3 points of security assistance since the invasion began. These are supplies, weapons, that precisely what Ukraine needs to defend itself. We started doing this of the Russian invasion. We started doing it last summer. We did it again in December in advance of the invasion. And of course, we have announced multiple drawdowns during the course invasion. We are now at our 9th presidential drawdown. The fact, however, is that right now, our coffers in terms of drawdown funding, they're dwindling. And providing $3.8 billion worth of security assistance since the start of the invasion, we now have less than $100 million left, and we will exhaust those funds this week. And so Secretary Blinken, together with Secretary Austin, they have conveyed a very simple message to congressional leadership. The message is, we need your help. We need Congress's to it, that the strategy that President Biden pledged before Russia's, that has proved effective in helping our Ukrainian partners be effective at defending their country. That is a strategy for which funding will be exhausted in key ways as of next week. We view the request that is before Congress now, the supplemental budget request, of what these funds will enable us to do. All stripes for the people of Ukraine who are waging this fight to preserve their freedom, to preserve their democracy, and to preserve their constitutional assistance. We've requested, the brunt of our supplemental emergency request was in fact for security assistance, precisely what our Ukrainian partners need to defend themselves. That includes artillery, advanced air defense systems, all for Ukraine. This funding will also go beyond the security realm. It will help Ukraine keep schools open. It will help replenish this US troops on NATO territory. It will help our Ukrainian partners and also our NATO allies do precisely what we feel it is imperative that they be positioned to do at this moment.
Asking about the assistance, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Price. First of all, thank you very much for yesterday's your answer. Afghan women, they are so happy, but they still ask me and ask you that what option will bring to Taliban if they didn't fix themselves about the women's job. This is regular job that every Afghan do it. We don't have any problem, but like that, and also Afghan people ask, based of your opinion, why United States failed to fix Afghanistan 20 years?
Thank you. So let me start by following up on the conversation we had yesterday about some of the very disturbing, very concerning edicts we've heard from what we've heard in recent days regarding the requirement for women's attire, what we've heard about the restrictions on girls attending secondary schools. All of these have been deeply concerning. And it's not only concerning to us, in some ways much more importantly, it is much more important that it is deeply concerning across their country, across Afghanistan. They have voiced their opposition to this edict that proposes severe limitations on half population and that effectively limits and constricts the ability of half of Afghanistan's population to participate fully in Afghan society. So combined ban on girls' secondary education, restrictions on freedom of movement and targeting of peaceful protesters, the Taliban's policies towards women are an affront to human rights, and they will compare the Taliban's relations with the international community, including with the United States. We're discussing these developments with our partners around the world. The legitimacy and support the Taliban seeks from the international community, they know that it depends on their conduct, including and centrally their protection on the rights of commitments that the Taliban has made privately. These are commitments, again, much more importantly, that they have made publicly to their own people, and these are the commitments on which we are going to base and we are going any future relationship that we will have with the Taliban. And we know that other countries feel similarly. Other countries with whom we've worked closely on Afghanistan since August of last year and of last year do feel similarly. In the interim, we've paused nearly all senior level engagement with the Taliban in response to the Taliban's decision in March to prevent secondary education. We do remain concerned about these other restrictions that we talked about. We believe, first and foremost, that the Taliban have pledged, once again, publicly to respect. We have heard that very message from our Afghan partners in recent days. Tom West, our special representative for Amiri, our special representative for for women and girls, Ian McCrary, our representative who is now based in Doha, have heard that message from Afghan in recent days. Our Afghan partners tell us that they have seen a disturbing pattern of restrictions on their rights that doesn't reflect the cultural or their hopes for Afghanistan's future. It also doesn't reflect what they heard, what the world heard from the Taliban. This, of course, brings back of the Taliban from the 1990s. We remain, as I said before, in close communication with our allies and partners regarding our shared concern. And again, the Taliban's responsiveness to the demands of the Afghan people and to the expectations of the international community will define not only our relationship with the Taliban, but the world's relationship with the Taliban. We know that we cannot have a normal relationship with the Taliban until they respect fully the rights of all of the people of Afghanistan.
Hold on. So what are you going to do? Can I re-ask my question from yesterday? So what are you going to do? And I don't understand. I mean, I saw that some people wrote, "Oh, U.S. says it's going to, if the Taliban doesn't reverse these decisions." But what measures have you taken, or are you going to take? And you haven't taken any, even though they've done these offensive things, going back more than a month now. So what exactly are you going to do, and why should anyone believe you when you say we're going to punish the Taliban or we're going to take steps to make our disapproval clear?
First, Matt, we have led the world at concern of when it comes to the humanitarian concerns of the Afghan people. I think we have established our leadership on that.
Did the United States lead the world in withdrawing from and allowing the Taliban to take control again?
Matt?
Yes or no? Yes, right? I mean, you can't deny that, can you?
I would absolutely reject the premise of the question that the United States allowed the Taliban to take the capital. And Matt, we can relitigate questions that have been litigated for the past 20 years about an investment that we have made in a country, including with treasure and, more importantly, this country, and the assessment of this president, that the presence of some 2,500 troops who would once again be involved in a civil war, who would be targeted, who would have a target on their back, not only by elements like ISIS-K, a 2,500 strong contingent that would not, in the end, would have been able to prevent the Taliban from coming to power. So you can argue with the decision that the president made to withdraw militarily from Afghanistan. We are confident in that decision. We know interest. We also know what we can accomplish without having a contingent of military deployment on foreign soil. And that's what we're trying to do with our humanitarian assistance. The humanitarian we have provided to the people of Afghanistan since August of last year has led the world, just as our provision of humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan prior to August of last year.
Has also said that human rights is its number one, or one of its top priorities in terms of foreign policy.
Central to our foreign policy.
Exactly. Doesn't seem to be
central. It is.
And then.
Matt, but you seem to be accusing us of what the Taliban is doing to the people of Afghanistan.
No, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm asking to.
And I am telling you, we are
prevent
doing.
this or to show your displeasure other than coming out with,
Saying it.
you know, saying it, you know, writing a nasty letter.
I can assure you we are.
Okay, there's been a lot of talk about reopening the embassy in Kyiv. Is there any discussion about sending people back to Kabul?
Aware of any discussion right now about reopening the embassy in Kabul?
Is it your belief, though, that Kabul is a war zone in the same way that Kyiv is?
There are a couple we look at. Safety and security is always at the top of that list. We also look at the propriety of what is appropriate in terms of diplomatic representation, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether
So
it's.
are you saying that one of the things you are doing to show your displeasure with the Taliban is not reopening the embassy?
What I'm saying is that we are not in a position to reopen the embassy. There are a number of safety and security is of course one, but also we take a look at the propriety of diplomatic representation around the world. Our point is that we will judge the Taliban and any fight one day have with the Taliban based on their conduct, based on their willingness to live up to the public commitments they've made to the world. First and foremost is human rights. Protecting rights of the Afghan people, including its women, its girls, its minorities, living up to its counterterrorism commitments, living up to the fact that no American hostage. We've discussed, of course, the case of Mark Frerichs. We'll continue to work to secure his freedom. There are a number of elements that go into our relationship we might one day have with the Taliban, but I can assure you that human rights is central to that list. Yes.
Can we move to U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit?
Sure.
So, how on U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit, especially on Myanmar or Burma, how does the United States plan to work with ASEAN to hold the military junta further accountable and the violence afterwards?
Well, we support ASEAN's decision to invite non-political representatives from Burma to high-level ASEAN events. Absent progress on the ASEAN 5-point forward, we will follow ASEAN's precedent for the upcoming U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit. And we're going to continue to follow that precedent because the regime has demonstrably progress on ASEAN's 5-point consensus, and it continues to escalate its violence, its repression, to urgently and to fully implement the 5-point consensus, and including an immediate and meaningful visit by the ASEAN Special Envoy and facilitation of his engagement with all stakeholders of the pro-democracy movement. Our partnership with ASEAN is central to returning Burma back to the path of democracy. I certainly expect it will be a topic of discussion as ASEAN on Washington descend on this building later this week, and we reaffirm our commitment to the Burmese people, and we will continue to promote a just and meaningful resolution to the crisis in Burma to that democratic path.
Are more U.S. sanctions against the junta on the table?
We will always look for ways to prove for the related violence, for the repression, for the human rights abuses, accountable those responsible. But we're always accountable those responsible.
Just speaking of upcoming regional summits to be held in the United States. You know where I'm going here?
You could be speaking of the COVID.
No, I would be
speaking of Summit of the Americas.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about the threats or threats is the right word, but suggestions that some countries might not, the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, and others are not going to be there?
I don't have anything to say right now on that. Of course, we will have more to say. It's closer. This will be an opportunity for countries throughout the hemisphere to come together to speak to our shared values, interests that unite us. Of course, the White House, as the host of the 9th Summit, will determine which countries to invite. The White House has not issued official invites to the summit at this. Those will go out soon.
Well, when you say countries throughout the hemisphere, does that mean all countries, or could some be excluded?
That is a question that
do not share your values.
The invitations, White House, and so we'll have more to say once invitations are extended.
Can I please also ask who will represent Burma on Friday's special summit? I'm asking because the United States sent out the invitation.
Sorry, you're asking because?
Who will represent Burma in the special summit? Because the U.S. sent out an invitation.
We'll have, and I'm sure you will see more on that in the.
Attending in person?
He
or-
will. He will. That's a plan. Yes.
Going back to the security assistance for Ukraine, the president, of course, is meeting with the Italian prime minister. There's been concerns expressed in that country, other allies, of weapons flowing into Ukraine. Does the administration see a limit, especially when it comes to lethal aid?
We have made clear, and the president made clear before the invasion, have also been speaking to this, starting before the invasion, but certainly during the invasion, that we would do three things in response to a Russian against Ukraine. We would provide Ukraine with the security assistance it needs to defend itself, the weapons that it would require to defend Ukrainian freedom, Ukrainian independence. Second, we would fortify NATO. We would see to it that our allies, especially our allies on the eastern flank, had what they needed to deter, potentially even respond to Russian aggression. And third, we made clear that we would put an unprecedented amount of pressure on the Kremlin, financial sanctions, through export control measures, through tools that we would enact with partners and allies around the world. We have made good on all three of those steps. We provide Ukraine with what it needs to defend itself. This is about self-defense. It is about preserving what is important to the Ukrainian people and what is in turn important to us, and that is democracy and its independence. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Jahan Ali from Airway News TV, Pakistan. Sir, Secretary Blinken called youngest Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Bilal Bhutto Zardari, and food security summit. So what were the points of discussion during the talk, and are we expecting any one-to-one meeting between Secretary Blinken and Bhutto?
I don't have any bilateral meetings to preview during the security gathering in New York. What I can say is that Secretary Blinken did have an opportunity to speak with his new Pakistani counterpart, Foreign Minister Bilal Bhutto Zardari, last week, May 6th, opportunity to reflect on the 75th anniversary of U.S.-Pakistani relations, to talk about how we can strengthen that cooperation. It is a broad-based bilateral relationship. The Secretary underscored the resolute U.S.-Pakistan commitment to Afghan stability and to combating terrorism as well. Ongoing engagement when it comes to our economic ties, trade, investment, climate, energy, health, and education. So it was a wide-ranging conversation, as these introduction times are, and I expect before long they will have an opportunity to follow up.
So
on
former Prime Minister Imran Khan still blaming U.S. for his ouster from Prime Minister office and leading an anti-American campaign. His anti-American campaign creating fractures among the structure of the diplomatic relation between Pakistan and U.S., or it doesn't matter?
We are not going to let information and disinformation, lies, get in the way of any bilateral relationship we have, including with the bilateral relationship we have with Pakistan, one we value.
So ISI's chief in Washington, D.C., is there any meeting with the Secretary Blinken or any other State Department officials?
I would refer you to Pakistani authorities to comment on his schedule. I'm not aware of any meeting with Secretary Blinken. Yes?
I have a question about Taiwan. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson criticized the State Department has changed the explanation on Taiwan, wording related to Taiwan. Could you help us understand the significance of changing of the words? And was there any change on legal status of Taiwan or relationship?
Well, there's been no change in our policy. All we have done is update a fact sheet, and that's something that we routinely do with our relationships around the world. When it comes to Taiwan, it remains guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint communiques and 6 assurances, as that very fact sheet notes. We regularly do updates on our fact sheets, reflect, in the case of Taiwan, our rock-solid, unofficial relationship with Taiwan. And we call upon the PRC to behave responsibly and to pretenses to increase pressure on Taiwan. Yes?
Is it oxymoron to say Taiwan is part of China if the United States has to switch diplomatic relations in 1979?
I didn't catch the first part of your question.
Is it oxymoron to say Taiwan is part of China if the United States had to switch nation from Taiwan to China in 1979?
We operate under the auspices of our One China policy.
So
yes.
can I just make sure I understand this? So there is absolutely no in policy towards Taiwan and China based on, so why was it updated? Why did it change the language?
As probably
I do.
better than most that
I
we
know very
that we
well, but you know what? I also know that anything having to do with Taiwan is anathema to any change, even if it's in a sentence, is going to get Beijing's attention,
Well-
and they're gonna be unhappy about it. So why now? Why was the decision made to change the fact sheet? If there's no change, then why change the fact sheet?
The fact sheet had not been updated in several years. You know that our fact sheets are regularly updated. I think we care most that our relationships around the world are reflected accurately in our fact sheets. I don't think we're as concerned as to what other countries
Okay.
might
Well,
latch
as you-
onto in an effort to create a pretense.
As you know, Harry was supposed to give a speech this week about US-China policy. And of course, he had to postpone it because of his. Was this fact sheet updated in anticipation, or was it mistakenly updated?
No, it wasn't a mistake.
Yeah, but was it going to be updated in?
Has not changed.
But the language in it has changed, correct?
The substance has not changed. The policy has not changed.
The language in it has changed, and we all know that language means things, right? So there was, essentially you're saying there was no reason at all. The previous language could have stood and it would still be viable.
I invite you, rather than just say words have changed, to
Well, I
offer
looked at the
examples
two
of,
side
of
by
what
side.
might be different. And you will find that our underlying policy, that our One China policy has not changed. It remains guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint communiques, and the 6 assurances. Yes.
And on Russia-Ukraine, let me start with the Secretary's statement activity. Can you tell us more about your findings? Any, let's say, indication to Russia's increased capabilities that would tell, immediate neighbors that they are much more vulnerable than they used to be? If you talk to anyone in Georgia, Estonia, they will tell you, we told you so years ago, you never listened to us. But what does it tell capabilities right now? And also, secondly, I think the Secretary mentions new mechanisms to help Ukraine to detect and also to protect from attacks. Any additional details about that?
Sure. So on your second question first, and I'll get to today's announcement. But we have worked very closely with our Ukrainian partner, including in the months preceding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to bolster their cyber capabilities. And so when we talk about some of the attacks that took place against Ukraine, DOS attacks that took place in the days and weeks prior to Russia's invasion, we've made the point, and our Ukrainian partners, more importantly, have made the point that their systems were back up, fully running, in many cases, within hours. And that is a testament to Ukraine's capabilities in the cyber realm. It's a testament to its ability, to its cyber resilience, to its ability to weather such operations. And we have been quite instrumental in helping Ukraine get to today. And we did this in tandem with allies and partners in Europe. And in Europe, is to publicly share our assessment that Russia launched cyber attack against commercial satellite communications networks in an effort to disrupt Ukrainian command and control during the invasion, and that those efforts did have spillover effects into others. The activity disabled very small aperture terminals, or VSATs, in Ukraine and across Europe. This includes tens of thousands of terminals outside of Ukraine that, among other things, support wind services to private citizens, essentially serving as a link between satellites in the sky and systems on the ground. We and our partners are taking steps to help defend against Russia's irresponsible action. We've identified new mechanisms to help Ukraine identify cyber threats and recover from cyber incidents, precisely what I was referring to a moment ago. We've also enhanced our support for Ukraine's digital connectivity, including by providing data terminals to Ukrainian government officials and critical infrastructure operators. We praise Ukraine's efforts both in and out of government and help their country recover from malicious cyber activity, even as their country is under physical attack. And the way that Ukraine was able to whether against and to bounce back from these malicious cyber attacks, it was a testament of the ability of Ukraine's cyber defenders.
And one more question, let me press you on the SSD, if you don't mind. I think you understand why we are asking about, Russia's designation, because another country today recognized Russia as a terrorist state. How far are we from the SSDs? Month, you mentioned other countries went through parliamentarian, let's say, process. Are you expecting a message or any bill from the Hill, or we're missing here? Are we missing fact? Cuba last year was designated at least is how close is on its actions, current actions in Ukraine?
Well, whether it's this authority or any other authority, we don't detail our internal deliberations. But what I can tell you is that for every authority that's available to us, in this case, it's a law that determines the criteria for designating a state sponsor of terrorism, and we look at the facts. And so we are looking at both, and when it comes to the facts, we are closely at what Russia is doing, what Russia has done to the people of Ukraine to determine which policy tools are most appropriate and responsive to those actions. But again, note we have already placed enormous economic and financial pressure on Moscow. It is not just the United States that has done this, but it is countries around the world, dozens of countries across 4 continents as well. But if there is a tool that is appropriate as defined in this case or any other case by the law, and that would be effective, again, we will not hesitate to use it. Yeah.
That release of the information on the cyber attacks. Now, can you talk about the timing of that? Why was that done now? And also, we know some of those attacks are ongoing. Is there concern that that spillover effect could be felt again in Europe or other?
These things do take time. What I can say is that we've worked closely with Ukraine, with NATO, with other European partners and other parties since well before Russia's invasion, impact of Russia's malicious cyber activity against Ukraine. And over time, we sought out ways to meet Ukraine's need for cybersecurity and connectivity support, and we'll continue to augment that. I said, in the lead up to the invasion, there were a spate of attacks from which Ukraine was able to bounce back quickly. An element of that was the training, was the support had provided to our Ukrainian partners well before the invasion, knowing that decade, anytime we attribute a cyber activity such as this one, we do so with an eye to protecting sources and methods. We do so with an eye to the implications. In case we're able to attribute it publicly, having gone through a process, having consulted closely with our Ukrainian partners, with our NATO allies, with other European partners.
To the Philippines, if
Sure.
that's okay. How do you expect Marcos's presidency will have an impact on relations with the U.S. and American efforts to curb Chinese influence in the region? And then I have a question on Sudan.
Well, your question jumps ahead just a little bit. We're not quite there. We're monitoring the election results, and we look forward to renewing our special partnership and to working with the next administrational priorities. As I said, we look forward to working with the president-elect once that person is officially named to strengthen the enduring alliance between the United States and the Philippines. It's an enduring that is rooted in a long and deeply interwoven history, shared democratic values and interests, and strong people-to-people ties between our countries, as friends, as partners, as allies, closely to advance a free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient Indo-Pacific with the Philippines and in other bilateral contexts as well. And we're very pleased to welcome Secretary of Foreign Affairs Locsin to Washington this week for the U.S.-ASEAN Summit.
Okay. And then
Wait, before you go, all signs point to the conclusion that Marcos has won. So do you have any concerns about Bongbong Marcos being the president of the Philippines?
What I can say from a technical standpoint is that we understand the casting and counting of votes to have been conducted in line with international standards and without significant incident. Again, the underway. It is not for us to declare a winner. We'll wait for the Philippines election authorities to do that.
I'm just asking you if you have any particular concerns about Marcos's son, the next president.
We
certainly had concerns about Duterte.
We look forward to working with the president-elect on the shared values and the shared interests that have united our countries across generations.
the State Department released a statement last night supporting the tripartite political process in Sudan, but the UNITAM's talks that were supposed to kick off today did not. Is this something the U.S. is concerned about, and what process, which is facing criticism and suspicion from parties in the country, is the right path? And then is there any progress being made on holding security forces accountable for violence against demonstrators?
The statement last night, we released that statement to underscore our view that the UNITAM's African Union IGAD process is the best and inclusive path forward on Sudan's transition to democracy. Any deviation from that process would undo months of hard work with grassroots civilian activists and human rights defenders towards obtaining a broadly acceptable agreement. We do condemn violence against and unjust detentions of peaceful protesters, and we call for those responsible to be held accountable. Undue restrictions on local and international press in Sudan. We are prepared to levy consequences on those who impede or otherwise spoil Sudan's transition to democracy. We won't pass assistance to the Sudanese government until a credible civilian government is in place. We will, however, continue to support the Sudanese people, including through humanitarian assistance and continued uninterrupted since the takeover.
Sri Lanka, do you have anything new, any updates since yesterday, since the situation has further deteriorated?
Well,
and the new order to shoot site?
Well, we're concerned by the deployment of the military. We stress that peaceful protest never be subject to violence or intimidation, whether that's on the part of a military force or a civilian unit. More broadly, we're deeply concerned by reports of escalation over the past few days. We condemn, as I said before, violence against peaceful protesters. We call for a full investigation, arrest, and prosecution of anyone instigating and involved in acts of violence. As I said before, also closely monitoring the deployment of troops, something that is of concern to us. And we're also closely following political developments in the situation after the resignation of the Prime Minister. We urge the government and political leaders to work quickly to ensure public safety and work together to identify and implement solutions to achieve long-term stability in Sri Lanka. The government must address the Sri Lankan people's discontent over the economic crisis, including power, food, and medicine shortages, as well as their concerns about the political.
So in other words, the answer was no. You didn't have anything to add. You said yesterday, but you decided to go.
He asked about the deployment of military forces.
Yesterday.
Nazir.
Yes, you know, already several wars started in Afghanistan as they predicted. And Ahmed Massoud's son make a group. And they started some activity, some expert at the United States, Australia, Canada, they get together and make a group to fight against the Taliban, and Afghan people sacrificed in this. Does United States support some of them, either Ahmed Massoud group or some other expert that they try to do something against Taliban?
We believe the best way to protect and to promote all Afghans, including Afghanistan's women and girls, is through dialogue, inclusive dialogue. So we have continued to press the Taliban to take part in a meaningful initiative of all of Afghan society, including minorities, women, and girls.
So one of my colleagues sent me a question, if you would like to respond. So she says that US and Pakistan have education exchange relationship that opens doors to sharing ideas, best practices, innovation, and much more. Do you foresee continuation of such initiatives and efforts to expand relations with Pakistan and the people?
Our educational exchange program, whether it's with Pakistan, whether it's with any other country, it's a core element of our people-to-people ties. We've been fortunate to have Pakistanis studying. We have American students who've had the opportunity to study in Pakistan. Those types of exchanges are always helpful, are always valuable as we seek to understand Americans, seek to better understand the world, and as we have other countries better understand America. Nike, last question.
Yes, can I ask about South Korea? South Korea officially takes office today. Do you have anything on South Korea's offer to North Korea's to improve North Korea's economy if it abandons its weapons?
Well, let me start by saying that we do congratulate President Yoon Suk-yeol on his inauguration. The United States ROK alliance, rooted in the close friendship of our people. It's the linchpin for peace in the Indo-Pacific. We have been and we will continue to coordinate closely with the ROK to address the threat posed by the DPRK's unlawful WMD programs, and to advance our shared objective on the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This is in fact an objective that we share. It's an objective we shared with the last ROK we share with this ROK government, and I know that we look forward to the opportunities ahead over the phone, in person, including when the president travels to the ROK in just a matter of days with the new ROK administration on how we can.
Time before President Biden's visit to Seoul, I'm asking because it's an assessment by South Korea's intelligence chief.
I wouldn't want to put a specific time frame on it, but we've been warning for some time concern that the DPRK could undertake additional provocations. We've seen 3 ICBM tests, we've seen additional ballistic missile tests, and we've spoken of our concern that the DPRK may mount harm. Thank you all very much. Thanks.
Thank you.